Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Emmanuel. You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our learning discussion. We will be giving everyone a couple of minutes to join. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Financial Literacy Training Learning Discussion. We're almost ready to start. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Hi, everyone. Welcome for joining our financial literacy training learning discussion. We're still expecting some few other people to join the event today, but we're going to go ahead and start the introductory part of this event, and people will find us along the road. So I want to start by saying thank you very much for joining. We hope that we have a very engaging event for you ready, and we hope that you'll enjoy being part of this. For today, we have a full team. We have Eunice, the interagency cash coordinator, cash working group coordinator, who will be doing half of the presentation, and myself, Marijke from ULearn. I'll also be a presenter today. Then we have Edwin, who is sharing a screen and helping us with some of the technical things along the way. He'll also be one of the facilitators in a breakout group. Colleen, who is the host of this meeting, if you have any technical issues, please drop her a message in the chat box. She'll be able to help. Andy is taking notes, and Charlene will also be supporting with some of the breakout group sessions. So throughout the session, the chat box is used for commenting, asking questions, to make it as dynamic and interactive as possible. So please feel free to drop your comments and questions over there. There will always be someone keeping an eye on the chat box and bringing things in as necessary. I also just want to flag that, of course, we're sadly enough on an online event. We're expecting a lot of people, and I really would have wished we could have done this in real life and actually be in one room. I could have told you all to put your computers aside, but sadly enough, that is still not the case, hopefully very soon. So just in case of any technical issues, please do bear with us. They're really unavoidable in these big online meetings. Also, so we're aiming for this event to be quite high-paced. We'll be using a lot of participatory tools. So please do keep engaging in the event so that you're kind of ready to switch to a Jamboard, to a poll, and I'll talk you through the different tools we'll be using in a second. Finally, I just want to say that we are very aware that it's a difficult time for the refugees in Uganda and for everywhere really. COVID-19 has hit everyone, but of course the settlements and the refugees generally as much as anyone else, and even more. And of course, there's also the context of the decreased funding. So we're very aware that we're doing this discussion today in a complicated context on the ground. But we're hoping that by learning from each other, we can still, make our work more effective and push ahead. So thanks. All right. I want to start by saying that today we're really looking at research, learning, sorry, not research. So what that means is that we have started by really looking at the current practices in Uganda. We've started by talking to different actors, by looking at the resources that exist. So this might seem a little bit like research, but it really isn't. What our objective is for today is to adopt good practices. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to avoid repeating the same mistakes. And we want to really facilitate uptake of those existing evidence already. We want to bring you together to learn from each other, to learn from what's already happening, so that we can identify some things that are happening, innovations, good practices that could be beneficial for your work. We want to exchange knowledge. So how does this differ from research? Research is really filling identified evidence gaps in a systematic manner, where the objective there is to create new evidence and to create knowledge. So that is really not what we're doing here today. We're trying to use what's already there. We're trying to kind of have a discussion, facilitate exchange on what's already there so that everyone can learn from each other. And that's why we're calling it a learning discussion. We're fostering learning through participant engagement and discussion. So then a little bit about the background. So we started in March by doing a consultation with the cash working group. This was a consultation on research needs, on learning needs. And out of there, we really learned from all of the participants in the field that the most important thing to look at, to learn from each other at the moment, is financial inclusion. We then, in April, May, took the time to really think it through, plan, and develop an approach to a financial inclusion learning review series. In June then, we settled on our kind of the first concrete piece we wanted to get started on, which was financial literacy training. And we started by looking at what actors are out there, what specific questions are interesting to look at, and you know, what specific questions would be good for people to discuss amongst themselves. And then in July and August, we really started talking to people about this. We collected information, we collected evidence. We looked at existing resources, at existing experiences, and we transformed this into an analysis, into a discussion paper. So that discussion paper was shared ahead of the event, and I hope most of you had a chance to look at it. If not, of course, we'll drop the link in the chat box again, and you can take a look after the event. But this discussion paper after the event will be transformed into a learning brief, which will include some of the recommendations and the findings and the discussions that we're having today. So we started, as I mentioned, by prepping for this event, really, for this discussion, for this learning, by collating and curating the existing evidence. So we reviewed over 30 publications from Uganda and resources, some of them private, not all public. And then we discussed with 16 of the key actors. And today, as I mentioned, is really the start of the next phase. We'll move from, you know, looking at what's going on to developing lessons and recommendations. So I mentioned earlier that we are started by mapping the actors that we knew were doing financial literacy training. So the actors, and you're seeing this on your screen here, fall apart in these groups, the ones that we know of. We used an snowballing approach. So we really talked to people and got referred to other people that were doing financial literacy training. And that's how we kind of mapped these ones. It's not an exhaustive mapping. It's just a quick actor mapping. But it is indicative for the key actors that do engage on financial literacy training. Some of the big groups that are very active on this are INGOs. I think that's expected, and local actors that often implement, but also private sector actors, which is, I think, a very important element to be aware of. And then just before we get started, let's look at the agenda. So today will be, sorry, don't get discouraged. It seems like a lot, but you know, part of it's already introduction and closing. So we'll start by looking at the landscape of financial literacy training in Uganda. This is really talking you a little bit through and engaging in discussing about, you know, what we found out there, what's happening, what are people doing as part of which activities, what are the definitions people use. And then we'll look at how participants are selected. You know, who are the financial literacy training participants? We'll then look at training and curriculum, what constitutes a training, take a closer look at the curriculum, but also at the methods and the tools that are used to deliver those curricula. We'll look at training of trainers, and I just want to like mention that we are using a lot of interactive methods. So it might be that we are going to be spending some more time on the first topics that you're seeing here. So in case we're running really behind on our schedule, we will take out the training of trainers section today and move this to a further cash working group meeting to be discussed there. And then finally, we'll look at coordination and collaboration. We'll be discussing the 4 Ws that we prepared, and we're hoping that you can help us today to fill in the gaps and to make sure that we've put everyone in the correct position. And then finally, we'll summarize and look at some next steps, some exciting next steps, I must say. So you see that we're talking about a couple of things. We're talking about participant selection, about training curriculum, about TOT, about coordination. But of course, there's so many other things that we're not discussing. We're not talking about monitoring and evaluation today. We're not talking about digital financial literacy training. We're not talking about, financial service providers. These are topics that we think are equally important and will be are part of the notes that we got, or part of the discussions we had with people in the field. And they were so important. We got so much interesting material on that we decided to do separate things on these topics. Or the cash working group, new financial literacy training subgroup, will take some of these elements forward. So then the objectives. So today, I think I mentioned most of these. It's all about learning. So it's really about giving you an overview of the existing practices and evidence that's in Uganda. We create more of a common understanding, discuss it. We start developing lessons and recommendations, and hopefully this will lead to increasing our coordination and collaboration. Before we get going, I just want to talk a little bit about the participatory tools we'll use. We have a lot of ground to cover. So hopefully this will, will work easily. I shared a little link to a Jamboard in the email that we sent the invite. So I hope most of you got a quick look at that. But so what we'll be using today is Mentimeter, the polls. We'll use a couple of polls, 3 in total, and I'm sure most of you by now have already used this. We'll have one breakout group, only one. We'll use a Google spreadsheet for the 4 Ws. And as I mentioned, we'll be using Jamboards. So I mentioned the YouTube video that I sent, and I just want you all to open the first Jamboard. My colleague Kelaine is now dropping the link into the chat. So if you open the first Jamboard, I'll give you all just 1 minute to do so. You see on the top, there is a little box where it says 1 out of 8. Let me use a highlighter to show you. Here we go. So here on the top, I can't, above the red dot, you see there's 1 to 8. These are the different slides that are part of the Jamboard. So I'll ask you not to skip ahead while we're discussing, just stay on the first one for now. And then in the Jamboard, the tools that you have is here. You have a pen. I hope you can all see on top left. You can select the pen you want, you can select the color, and then you can start using it on the Jamboard. The 4th one down is very important. It's a sticky note. If you open it, you'll be able to tap on it, right? Your organization will be most of what we'll ask you to do, and then put it on the Jamboard. When you click save, when it's there and you see that I've put test, you can make it smaller. Oh, test, sorry, or bigger. You can twist it. You can also hit the 3 dots in the upper right corner to duplicate or delete it. And then finally, the one but last on your left-hand side is a T in a box. This is a text box, as you might be used from Word. You can draw a text box and then just write your organization in there or something else that you want. And you can move it around. You can, again, copy it, delete it, twist it, anything you want. So this is a Jamboard. So as an exercise, just so everyone can familiarize themselves with it, kindly write your organization in a text box or in a pen on the left side and use a sticky note in the right side, on the right side to put your organization name. I'll give you a couple of minutes just to familiarize yourself with the Jamboard. Thank you very much. In the meantime, my colleague Kelaine will drop the link to the first poll in the chat box. So when you feel like you've tested the Jamboard and you're happy that you know how to use it, please go back to our meeting and go to the chat box, click on the link to the first poll, and I'll hand over to my colleague Eunice to start talking us through that.
And when your speaker is not working.
Can you
Yux is just taking a second.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo, but we can hear you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so you've just given us definitions of what you understand by self-reliance. I'm going to move to the next slide and I will show you, I mean, we will definitely go through the definitions we have gotten out that you had with you. And so basically self-reliance is being able to take care of yourself or being independent, just as you have mentioned on the slide before. And financial inclusion is the ability for all Ugandans and refugees to access and use a broad range of financial services, quality and affordability being the key thing. And then again, the financial literacy training is that training that people are given to have the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence to manage their money. Now, why is this important? Why are we looking at this whole spectrum of 3 different definitions? This is because financial literacy training is actually part of a process to actually achieve financial inclusion. And financial inclusion leads to self-reliance. Yeah. So this is actually what we also found out in our discussions with yourselves, and that in the context of Uganda, of course, refugees need to have financial literacy training, which will contribute to the bigger umbrella of financial inclusion. So financial literacy training in itself is just a small component that would lead to financial inclusion. And hopefully, by financial inclusion, will lead to self-reliance. What is important to note here is that this is not a linear process. It actually occurs in different stages. And one element could actually lead to financial inclusion and then lead to self-reliance in the end. And in the road to financial inclusion and self-reliance, a refugee's journey is it's not a linear process. It's actually a very curved and winding road. It's not a straight line. And the ability for a refugee to actually travel along this ride is different from each person, as we are going to see today. And it's based on previous knowledge, experience, and on their Excel journey, basically. And you will see this from the discussions that you're going to have today, that a refugee's journey, of course, starts from managing limited personal finances, engaging in community financial products, maintaining successful businesses, and then maybe getting involved in formal financial services. And this can be an all-round process that we found out in our discussions with you. So basically, it's not a standalone activity. Financial literacy training exists within other activities that we have. And I want us to look at it in the spectrum of 3 key activities. Yeah. So one, it has a wide variety. It's not a standalone, and it can be classified into 3 main categories. One, when financial literacy happens as part of the cash-based interventions that we are doing in our normal programming. So you're providing cash assistance, or you're providing assistance using cash. And therefore you want the beneficiaries to be better informed about how they're going to use their cash. So that's the first group. The second group is when you're targeting financial literacy training, targeting VSLAs, or groups that are involved in savings and loans activities at village level. And the third group is on financial institutions, people that want to access loans or products that come from microfinance institutions or even banks. So these are the key 3 categories that we found out in our discussions with you. That the 3 categories, basically, financial literacy training is majorly divided into these 3 categories. It does, of course, it does not exist in a vacuum, and there are a lot of varieties, as you will see today. And each of the objectives of the financial literacy training is sometimes, most of the times, really tied to the programmatic activities that it enables. So if you're doing a cash-based interventions, your financial literacy training is really related to the kind of activity that you have. Okay, moving to the next one. So we are going to get into our first activity now. And not first, but second activity now. And in here, we are going to get into an exercise using the Jamboard that Marike had showed us before. So please click on the Jamboard link in the chat box and go to Jamboard link number 2. So we are going to click on the Jamboard and click on Jamboard number 2.
Someone edited it. Okay. So I'm very sorry, we're having a minor technical difficulty. We had a couple of Jamboards lined up for you, but I see that
they've gone.
So we'll just very quickly draw it as we go along. So you'll see me drawing now. Well, I'm drawing a group for the CBIs here. So if you are implementing financial literacy training as part of a CBI activity, take a sticky note, put on the name of your organization, and then include it there. Then if you're implementing financial literacy training as part of a group activity, please do it in this one. And then my colleague Kalain is happily assisting me with already doing the third one for financial institutions. That's the nice blue one. So please, if you have an organization which is implementing financial literacy training as part of a financial institution, move it to the third green circle. So I'm going to remind you that the first circle that we're seeing on our left is for organizations implementing financial literacy training as a cash-based intervention. The one on top is for activities that organizations that are doing it as a group VSLA activity. And the one on your bottom right is for organizations that are doing this as part of a financial institution. So for instance, I see Equity Bank. I wonder, Equity Bank, would that probably be part of the financial institutions and not the CBIs? Or maybe it is. Great. So if you could all take a sticky note. So I remind you, it's on the left side of your screen, the fourth icon down. You take a sticky note, you fill in the name of your organization, you place it in a bubble. So you can also write, as I see someone from DRC doing. So the left circle is interventions, the top circle is group VSLAs, and the right circle is financial institutions. I'll give you 1 minute to continue with this. I can see Oxfam, DRC, UCC, Uganda Cash Consortium, all implementing financial literacy training as part of cash-based interventions. I can see Save the Children implementing financial literacy training as part of group VSLA activities. I can see PHB development. I can see Equity Bank implementing financial literacy training as part of financial institution activities. So let me give you 1 more minute. And then we will be moving on.
Thank you. So we see that a lot of us are actually intervening at the household level, meaning that as we provide cash to the households, we are also providing financial literacy training targeting just that. And thank you, Yula and team, for coming to the rescue. I think someone deleted all the jumbots that we took a lot of time to prepare, but this is fine. You will bear with us. Please don't edit anything because then it affects the level of trainings. Thank you very much, Yulan, for coming to the rescue very quickly. But yes, it's exactly what we want to get. And it's exactly where we want to see that a lot of the organizations that are participating in today's training are actually intervening at household level as part of their cash-based interventions. But we also see quite a number of them being engaged at groups or VSLA levels. I see Oxfam, ILO, and we have others that cut across the board for the 3 levels, both at financial institution activities and as well as the cash-based interventions. This is very interesting because it actually represents the short-term objectives when we are doing financial literacy training. We will come back to see how the short-term objectives actually link to what we had just seen in the previous slide, linking that to financial inclusion and linking that to self-reliance as the bigger goal of having engaged in financial literacy training. Thank you for all that have filled in. And I think we are now ready to get into something that we found extremely interesting, And this is the 4W matrix, where we got to see different organizations being present in different areas. We have already pre-prepared this Excel sheet, and you only need to confirm that where we have placed you, based on the discussions that we had with you, is actually the right place. So you will see the Excel sheet that actually represents the different locations where we had discussions with yourselves. You will see, for example, the locations such as Adjumani, Bidibidi, Naki Valley, because this is all geared towards the refugee response. You will also see that we have pre-ticked, and if your organization is not part of that in the Excel sheet, kindly use the free boxes to fill in. And important to mention that this Excel sheet relates to only those that have an active financial literacy training program ongoing. So if you want to do this in future, that is fine, but this is not going to be the place to fill in. This relates to if you have an existing funding right now or a confirmed funding that is going to be happening very soon. So you have dates, and therefore you just need to confirm where we have placed the different organizations and whether this is actually the right place. I will give you a minute to do so, but just to remind you that this particular link is going to be available throughout the program. So in case you need more time to fill it in, please don't be hesitant to do that. So we want to find out who is missing. Do we have more people who have financial literacy training actually happening in the different settlements? So you have an opportunity to place your organization, or maybe just confirm that this is actually the case. So the link is going to be in the chat. Do not be afraid to go back to it as we continue with our discussions, as this is very, very important. It will form an opportunity for us to really coordinate better and speak to each other, especially if you see in a particular settlement, there are over 10 organizations offering financial literacy trainings. So that means there needs to be a discussion happening there.
Maybe also just a reminder not to touch the structure of the Excel spreadsheet. If there's any lines missing, we will happily add them. So please let us know in the chat box. Please do not delete any info from other organizations. Just kindly check your own information or add your own information so that we have a full picture. We will get back to the 4Ws at the end of the session when we're talking about collaboration and coordination. So we'll leave you to fill this in while we continue presenting a little bit further.
Thank you. So don't hesitate to use the link to come back to it and confirm whether your organization has actually been placed in the right place. Moving on. So let us see the objectives that we saw from the discussions that we had with you. And Marike mentioned at the beginning that we had over 30 discussions across the board, running from donors to the implementers to financial institutions. And these are the key objectives that we found. Even when implementing financial literacy training, we saw the short-term objectives are really linked to the programmatic objectives. So you're doing a multi-purpose cash transfer, and therefore your short-term objectives are really linked to that particular program objectives that you want to achieve. Those that are doing long-term interventions that go over 3 to 4 years have also a different way of how they're approaching financial literacy trainings. In Uganda, we got a general understanding that refugee equate financial literacy training to the sound use of cash-based transfers. So basically, how they better use the transfers that they had. And this is in the short term. And it is actually involving an inclusive development, equitable empowerment, and financial inclusion in the long term. So why is this very important? it is important to understand that financial literacy is varied, even from the discussions that we had. And the understanding of what it is and what it actually needs to achieve is really based on individual organizations or individual programs. Our priorities during the program implementation, financial inclusion and reliance are long-term objectives that we need to achieve. And in order for us to really get to the long-term objectives, we need to really move beyond the activity level and get to the outcome level. Yeah, we need to keep the long-term goals in mind when we are implementing the short-term goals. So when you're doing your little program activities, you're implementing a cash-based transfer just for the purpose of beneficiaries being able to manage their cash-based transfers in the short-term value, then you need to understand that this does not exist in a vacuum, and therefore it is important for us to keep that diagram that we had initially, that financial literacy training is part of financial inclusion, and the ultimate goal is to actually get to self-reliance. So you're contributing to a small aspect of the self-reliance goal that we need to achieve. So keep the long-term goal in mind during your short-term activities of your project. So let us summarize what we have discussed in session 2. For those that have joined us, we have gone through session 1, and now we are on session 2, where we are going to just provide a small summary of what we had come up also through the discussions. So financial literacy training is part of a specific activity, but it does not exist in a vacuum. It is very important for us to really foster a common understanding of financial literacy training, financial inclusion, and self-reliance, and how they are interconnected and contribute to each other. When you are achieving your short-term objectives that are linked to your program activities, it is very important to keep the long-term objectives in mind. And the long-term objective is to really get to self-reliance, just as we had seen in the slides that preceded this particular one. So let us go, and this is actually based also on the discussions that we had with the multiple of yourselves that we had discussions with.
All right, thank you so much, Eunice, for talking us through the objectives and definitions of financial literacy training, financial inclusion, and self-reliance. Now, the next thing we'll do is we'll go to a breakout group exercise. As I mentioned, there's only one today. The breakout groups will be facilitated. We'll go in 4 groups. They have been pre-assigned, so you don't have to do anything. And they will be facilitated by myself. And groups are in line with the organization's core activity. This is the exercise we just did on the Jamboard. Is your financial literacy training part of your cash-based interventions core activity? Is it part of the group activities, VSLAs? Is it part of the financial institutions activities? Then you'll be in the respective breakout groups. So we pre-assigned you. I'm very sorry if you feel like we have wrongly assigned you to the group. I think it's a short exercise, so feel free to just go with the flow. In case you really would like to change groups, you can always return to the main group and talk to Kelaine. She will be staying there, and then she can assign you to another one. So this is a very quick 10 to 15 minute exercise. It's geared at putting yourself in the shoes of a participant. So we really want to we're all sitting, no, not all of us, but a lot of us are sitting in our offices often. You know, it's kind of a little far away from maybe the field. I mean, some people are implementing, of course, but implementing only in their specific area of operations. So what we want to do is for you to take a step back and imagine you're a participant. And who is the average participant that your kind of group works with? So if you're doing cash-based interventions, what does an average participant look like? And this is, we'll have a sheet with a couple of questions that we'll fill in as a group. The objective is not to have like long discussions on each of the questions, but rather to quickly fill it in so that we can come to an average profile of an average participant. So the facilitator of the group will take the notes and share their own screen so that you can, of course, follow with what's being entered. And then after this short exercise, we'll just do a comparative kind of summary in the main group. So I invite Colleen now to divide us all in our breakout groups. And so see you very soon.
Hello, Kelaine. Can you hear me? Is it possible? It's Julia here. Is it possible to move me to Edwin session?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the main room.
Thanks, Marike.
All right, just give me 1 minute. We're going to be right with you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the main room. Sorry, there's a big echo. Let's just try to resolve this. Let's hope the echo is resolved now. No, it's not. No, it's not. Sorry. I'm just testing. Hopefully now. Yes.
Still some echoes.
Now we should all be good to go. Nope, sorry. We're really resolving it almost. All right, great. Here we go. So thank you so much for participating in the breakout groups. As promised, they were short, and it was really an exercise to really bring us down to reality. What are we seeing in practice? Who are the participants or the groups we're working with? So just for everyone to understand that we had 4 different groups. The first 2 were looking at people that are doing financial literacy training as part of a cash-based intervention. The third one was looking at people, or organizations rather, that are doing financial literacy training as part of a savings activity. And then the third one as part of financial institutions linkages activities. So I was facilitating the first group, which was very interesting. We kind of settled on an average participant of a cash-based intervention activity that was getting financial literacy training as part of that activity is a woman, generally. She's about 30 years. She's called Solange. She has about 6 children. She's not the head of the household, so she's someone else if she's married. Her monthly income is about 100,000 shillings, which assumes that she is receiving cash handouts, cash transfers, sorry. And then about the household savings, there was a little bit of discussion with people saying, no, people really are not able to save to, let's say, a maximum of 10,000 per month. She does not keep records. She is receiving services or cash from an organization. She's not literate. She has no phone, or she does have a phone, or she's using her husband's phone. So this is the one area where we didn't have consensus. And on the majority of participants in cash-based interventions that we're describing have not had any financial literacy training before, but occasional it can happen that this has. And she does not have a income generating activity. That's often why she would be targeted. So this is part of the targeting or the criteria. And then we looked a little bit just very quickly at the criteria. So there's really consensus that the most important criteria for targeting, selecting participants is their willingness. If we go slightly back up, we can see that Yep. So FRC did mention that everyone across the board said age is really not a criteria, but FRC did say we do take productive age into account. An 80-year-old would be less likely to be a participant than a 30-year-old. And then on gender, also was for some people a criteria, but as I said, willingness was the most important one across the board. So I'll hand over to my colleague Edwin to just give a very, very brief overview of the second group.
Perfect. Okay, for our, our participant was called Draru. Draru was coming from the Congo. She's been in Uganda for a year now. She's age 33 with 3 children. And she's the head of household. So I think she doesn't have a husband, or the husband passed on. She has a monthly income of 100,000 shillings, but she doesn't save any money monthly. She doesn't really save. Okay, she has a smaller income generating activity, and she has what I call them miage savings. So she really doesn't really save, and kind of saves a little bit. And she maintains records, but she doesn't keep them digitally, or she doesn't have them on paper, but she maintains them in her head, so she knows how much she's saving per month. And we're caught on time. So there was an issue of the mobile phone. She has a mobile phone. And then she's not that literate. So when we came to whether it was mandatory to have most of these variables in place as we're targeting, we established that it was really important to have the details, the biodata of this particular participant. We would want to have their names, we want to have their gender, and then also the number of persons in the household, as well as their incomes and whether they are saving. So we envision this as let's say WFP that is giving cash to this particular beneficiary. Thank you. Charlene will come next.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Our group looked at VSLAs that receive financial literacy training. And what was interesting with this group was that there was a lot of diversity actually in the kind of VSLAs that get targeted. If you can scroll down just a little bit more, please. So the agreement was it's mandatory for the VSLA to be supported through financial literacy training, to be living in a quite limited geographic area, because they need to be able to reach the training site and the meeting site by foot. And there needs to be at least one reference language that is common to everyone in the group. And that's the language that the trainer will be using. Then we saw a bit of variation between the different partners in the group. Some say they start training very early on at the beginning, at the setup of the VSLA, so that they get the basics right. Others are more interested to actually start afterwards when the VSLA is more mature, so after the second cycle. In terms of composition of the VSLA, we noticed that depending on the project focus, it can completely vary in gender and also age, and that some projects have a strong intent on including the spouses of the actual members. Can we scroll down a bit more? Then we had to skip a couple of questions. And so, what was really critical to everyone was the fact that the VSLA needs to be registered, have a management structure, have a record keeping system in place. Some of the record keeping is happening digitally with at a more or less advanced level, depending on programs. And finally, we looked at the question of whether or not the members of that VSLA that are now trained on opportunities for VSLAs in savings and loans, etc., have already been trained before. And here it was variety. Sometimes this is the first training they access. Sometimes they've already received training. Sometimes they have to undergo an individual training before going into that one. So here again, a variety. Thank you. Over to you, Eunice.
Thank you very much, Charlene. In our group, we looked at a beneficiary that is being targeted by a financial institution or a microfinance. His name is John Ochola. He's 28 years old, and he is actually running a business. He is the head of the household. He has a business that he's running that generates for him 300,000 Uganda shillings in a month. And plus his wife's income and his son's income, they have a total of income of 500,000 in their household. They are able to save half of it. They keep very good records of their income and expenditure on a monthly basis. It doesn't really matter if they have received a loan before. It doesn't matter whether any of the family households is literate or has been trained before on financial literacy training. It doesn't matter if they speak English or not. And but it is very important that they have a mobile phone, and that it's not really a must that they are part of a VSLA. Yeah, and it's also an added advantage if they have received financial literacy training before. So this is the profile of John Ochola, who is being targeted for a loan or a financial product by a bank or a microfinance. And that was in group 4. So colleagues, this is really an interesting exercise. I hope it has made us to really reflect back on who we target for financial literacy training. Despite the criteria that we have, our financial literacy discussions with yourselves showed quite a number of significant interesting aspects as to who we target when you're targeting financial literacy training, just like this exercise has showed. And what we have seen is that most of them are refugees, because we are working in the refugee context. Sometimes in very small context, we have a mix of 70-30 of host communities and refugees. They are predominantly women or female, but not on purposeful. Then we also saw that the financial literacy trainings that we are actually issuing out to the participants, we need to have a couple or 2 people per household, and it's preferable if one of them is literate. And of course, most of them are breadwinners or heads of households who are above 18 years of age. What is interesting is that what we got from the discussions that we had with you is that most of the participation is actually based on the objective of the program or the activity that we are implementing. Most of them that receive, for example, WFP cash-based food assistance needs to be part of the financial literacy training that WFP is offering. Or most of the time, if they have pre-existing financial experience, or they actually qualify with a vulnerability criteria, and we will see that quite a lot. And then we also saw that this has to be a voluntary participation. Most of the time, literacy is actually considered as a key criteria. And on identification, a lot of the organizations that we spoke to identified their beneficiaries using the UNHCR and OPM lists. And they also engage the community through a very engaging consultative process to really find their beneficiaries, and others depend on those who volunteer to participate in this. So based on this exercise that we have done right now, I think the key question is, how can we ensure we don't leave anyone behind, but still maintain the quality of training we want to offer? Yeah. And how can we move to a more standardized process of participant selection? Just to, for the interest of the members of the group, it is important for us to note that even when we had very elaborate criteria in our programs, when it came to the ground and really engaging the beneficiaries to participate in financial literacy training, it didn't seem to matter. The criteria didn't seem to matter so much. And it was a voluntary process open to everyone. So I think it's very important for us to have a standardized process of who we select to be a participant in financial literacy training, ensure we don't leave anyone behind, because of the criteria or the selection process that we have chosen. So I guess at this point, I would like to have an engagement from the group members or from the participants that we have right now. How can we make sure that we are actually maintaining quality, but also not leaving anyone behind? As we have seen from the exercises, this is not, there's a difference between what we intend to do and what we actually do on the ground. I'd like to just open the floor for anyone whose hand is going to be up to engage just a little bit on what you think could be the process. How have you made sure that you have not left anyone behind? How have you made sure that your criteria is all inclusive? And when you invite all these people to be part of your training, how do you ensure that you don't water down on the quality? So I'd like to ask someone to participate from the group and just share their thoughts on this process.
Yes, Eunice.
I'm looking out for hands.
Oh.
Okay, so we have Stephen Ogwal. Stephen, would you like to make your submission on that?
Thank you so much, Eunice. From my experience.
Please unmute your mic.
Can you hear me, Eunice?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I think we have locations where the refugees are coexisting with the host communities, and my thinking would be we be inclusive of both our direct beneficiaries and also the indirect who are the host communities. So in this, we shall not leave them behind. In most cases, for example, like the VSLA settings, we have our target beneficiaries who are the direct ones, but also among the group members, we have indirect members also who are participating in the VSLA. This improves on their coexistence and also scaling up the financial literacy training and also other VSLA methodology. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephen, for that contribution. Very important. I will take one more comment from John Baptiste.
Thank you, Eunice. On the issue of not leaving anyone behind, one, we choose the facilitators from the area where the local facilitator who comes from the same village, so that they are able to translate the text in the training manual in the local language, so that they are able to understand. Besides, we, as in our program, we do coaching where we visit the household and try to address individual need. So for standardized process of participant selection, we involve stakeholders, like in the settlement, we give the list to the OPM, UNHCR, and also partners doing livelihood programming. Thank you.
Really very important point. From the exercise, as you have mentioned, John, one of the key things is that our selection criteria doesn't really matter if this particular person or group has been trained before. So from our discussions, what we discovered is that we can have the same household trained on a same level of training on financial literacy training over and over and over again. Why? Because probably they are receiving this training because they are receiving some cash grants or services from that particular organization. So each organization comes in and actually just starts from the beginning without considering whether this particular household has been trained before. So like you have mentioned, there is a risk of duplication. It is already happening. And I think we need to have a very elaborate process of how participants are selected for financial literacy training. So we are going to now move to another session, which is actually going to bring out very important points. And thank you for everyone who has actually contributed to the discussion on the chat box. If you don't have an opportunity to share that, really appreciate if you can put your comments on the chat box. So just as a summary of that particular session, I think it's very important for us to really consider who we select as participants. It's important for us to select who we select as participants. And it is also important to have a standardized process to really reduce the risk of duplication. Okay, so we are going to go to the next session.
Great. So we'll go back to a Jamboard. So if I'm sorry, we don't have more time for spoken comments, but if you drop your comments in the chat box, we will make sure it gets included in our write-up, and therefore also in the learning brief that we'll be producing. So now we'll go back to the Jamboards. In the meantime, our team has been working behind the scenes to reestablish the ones that we had. So we can go to the second Jamboard or the third one. I see it's now. So the link is in your chat box. Please click on there and go to page 3 of that you can see on the top of your Jamboard. There you'll see that we are now looking at raising awareness on how money works and financial literacy training. So we would like to define a little bit or have keywords that kind of point to any of the two. So what are defining criteria for awareness raising? And what are defining criteria for financial literacy training? Pick a sticky note. I think that's the easiest. Write down a criteria and post it in the group. So for instance, one could say that a differentiation between raising awareness and training is the depth of the session. And then I could put that on a sticky note and put that on financial literacy training, for instance, could say this is more in depth. So please feel free to pick sticky notes and put them on the correct bubble. I don't see a lot of activity. Is everyone, I hope not, people are not having technical issues accessing the Jamboard. Please click on the link in the chat box and then pick a sticky note, which is on the left side of your screen, the 4th icon down. You can write down a criteria for awareness raising, a criteria for financial literacy training that kind of distinguishes between the two.
Indeed, and Marike, you have put it very well. One of the key things we identified is a very interesting approach on how we are approaching what we call financial literacy training. Would you call, for example, a 30 minutes to 3 hours training, financial literacy training? Does it matter how long you're trained for you to call it financial literacy training? We also saw extremes of how much, does the setup, for example, matter? If we sit under a tree and discuss for 1 hour, would you call that financial literacy training? If, for example, we are being trained by a community-based, leader, and he says, well, I am doing financial literacy training. Does the person who delivers the financial literacy training matter? Yeah. So the depth of the training, the setup, the approach, the materials that we are using, the modules that we have to go through. Consider this when you're differentiating between awareness raising and on how money works and financial literacy training. I see some engagements there. I would like to already start reading some of them. They're saying awareness has short sessions and are just reminders on how to use money. Amazing. They are usually done by anyone. There are informal high-level trainings. Sometimes it's public demonstrations. Anyone can be trained on this. You don't need to have a criteria for selection. And then on financial literacy training, they're saying that it has to be focused on short-term and long-term behavioral change. The presence of technical persons to support the training is important. More in-depth on how we multiply the money one has, okay? engaged on sharing information related issues on financial literacy training. It has to be several sessions, so not half an hour under a tree, yeah, from what I'm getting. And then it has to be a well-structured training with principles and approved curriculum, very, very important. And then it can focus on a variety of financial issues, for example, how to select what financial services are available in the area, digital financial services, etc., etc. So really interesting. We can all define what financial literacy training is and what it's not. Amazing. So let us look at what we actually found out in our discussions. Thank you for your participation on the Jamboard. We can already clearly see there is a difference. But is there a difference on how we implement it? Yeah. Let us see, for example, the duration. Yes. Let us see, for example, what we discovered as part of the financial literacy training in our discussions. So we are among the range of different people that we spoke to. Some did a financial literacy training for 2 weeks, for 4 weeks, for 6 weeks and 8 weeks, and for 10 weeks. So this is the variation. And I think now it's time for us to ask ourselves, are we doing financial literacy training, or are we creating awareness on how money should be working? Or are we creating awareness to the household on how they should really better use the money? And in doing this, we want to have the background of what we saw before, that financial literacy training is part of financial inclusion, and financial inclusion is what brings in self-reliance. So if we do a training for 2 weeks, we also came about others that do it for a much less time, but I think that this is really an exceptional case where you do it for 3 hours and send out the trainers to go and train other people. We will come back to that. But this is just one of the process. And on the group trainings, we saw a difference actually on this. And we saw that the group training is a standard actually. The number of participants vary between 10 to 30 participants. And then the grouping is actually most of the time grouped based on languages. And the second step is that it has to be in line with the programmatic objectives, yeah? And the groups are actually, most of the time, they come from the same geographical location, just as you had mentioned in the exercise that we did before. And they already, most of the time, are targeting pre-existing financial relationships. So for example, it's a VSLA or a saving groups that has been in existence for a while. So once again, we want to get to the depth of how we have been delivering financial literacy training. And I'm not sure whether we have a Jamboard ready. Yes, we do. Very good. Amazing team here. So we have a Jamboard on what we have been using, the content that we have been using on financial literacy training. What is the curriculum that we are using? Yeah. So let's just give it a minute as we get to the Jamboard. The link is on the chat box once again. Please get to the chat box, click on the Jamboard number 4 on pre-existing or on the different curriculum groups that we are using. So during our discussions, we came across 3 major curriculums that are being used across the board. And that's the Bank of Uganda curriculum, the WFP UNCDF curriculum, and those that have been tailor-made, either picking parts of Bank of Uganda, picking parts of ILO curriculum, and they are using this as the curriculum within the organization. So I'd like you to put, we had a very interesting Jamboard actually before, where we had all the logos of those that we had a discussion with. And so you'd only have to drag your organization logo and put it there. But in the interest of time and in the fact that we lost all the Jamboards, I'm just going to ask you to pick a sticky note and put in the diagrams where which curriculum your organization is using. So for example, WFP would definitely fall under WFP UNCDF curriculum.
And this would also be if your organization has developed their own curriculum, but it's heavily inspired on one of the existing ones. I know we spoke to people who said our organization has developed, adapted the Bank of Uganda curriculum, then please do position your organization under the Bank of Uganda curriculum. With organizational based, we really mean organizations that have used internally developed curriculums or curriculums, and I can see Grameen, I remember a discussion I had with someone from Grameen who indeed told me that, you know, they've been doing financial literacy trainings for a very long time, and they have in-house capacity to develop these curriculums and to adapt them and modify them according to the needs and the context. So this is the typical example of an organizational based curriculum. This could also be, for instance, if you're basing your curriculum internally on another organization's curriculum that is not part of this Jamboard. And we would really like you to drop that in the chat box, please, so we can learn which other curriculums have really served as an inspiration for the curriculums that are currently in use. For instance, we know at least one actor told us that ILO has a number of standard curriculums or standard modules that have inspired their work. And I don't know if there's any other, I think someone else told us about inspiring their curriculum on the CRS existing financial literacy training modules. So if you did, please kind of put that in the Jamboard, in the chat box rather. We would really love to learn from you. And great to see people actively putting their sticky notes in.
So we see, for example, there are quite a number of organizations that we spoke to that are using the Bank of Uganda curriculum. I see them on the chat box. You may want to pick a sticky note for FRC, and I think there's one more other, IRC maybe. Yeah, so three organizations are using the WFP UNCDF curriculum, while also, so maybe you need to, John Baptiste, you need to pick a sticky note. So the sticky note is actually what you see with a T inside.
No,
sorry, the one you see with the flip.
The fourth icon down. Yes, that
exactly.
One.
So if you pick that, first you get to the link on the chat box. Yeah, and then you are able to write where your organization falls in. Really interesting to see what's coming up. Equity Bank using their own organization based, same as FCA. There's one very little 100 weeks, and Grameen using organization-based curriculum. So we have also 100 weeks picking up some beats from the Bank of Uganda and also from ILO and WFP curriculum to make up their own organization-based curriculum, as well as FRC.
UNICEF failed to pick the sticky note.
Okay. It's okay if you tell us or put it in the chat box, we will add it for you. Okay, all right, let me add it for you, no worries. Where would you like to be positioned?
On organization base.
All right. Great.
Fantastic. So just to summarize this exercise, we do not have a shortage of curriculums in Uganda. As you can see, there's quite a lot of curriculums happening. Some are organization-based, some are really went through a very extensive collaboration phase, while some are actually drawn from the Bank of Uganda. What we are seeing, however, is that Organizations are crafting their own curriculums based on their own particular needs. We also came across the ILO curriculum, by the way, but we did not have many organizations that are using it. So if there's any organization that is here that is using any of those curriculums, please feel free to also mention the same. So moving on, we went through the curriculums, the many curriculums that were submitted to us. Marike already mentioned the number. And we went into looking at the content of these curriculums. What you see on your screen is a summary of what we should, we came across as the key things in the basic or the foundation curriculums that are being implemented in Uganda. So the first topic is on savings. The second topic is on personal finance management, loan management, financial services, and investment. And each organization had a little bit more modules based on what is their particular focus. So the question is, do we all agree that these are the minimum modules that anyone who is implementing financial literacy training must have in their curriculum? If not, please write on the chat box on what you think is missing. Okay. So we are going to go on a poll that will help us to know whether these are the main curriculums. So click on the chat box and you will see a Mentimeter. So this is actually from the chat box, and we are going to poll this. We are going to see whether we all agree that these are the main curriculum, these are the main modules anyone who is implementing financial literacy training must follow. Anyone who doesn't follow this, then he or she is doing awareness creation on money.
So just to support the technical side of things, please go to the chat box in your Zoom window. You click on the link that says www.mentim.com, etc. And then you will open it in a new window where you will see the question. Do you agree these are the minimum modules for a basic financial literacy training curriculum? If
Hi, there's a request if we could see the minimum modules at the same time that then we are filling the poll on the screen instead of the poll results.
I beg your pardon, Charlene.
Could we see the proposed minimum modules on the screen?
Oh, okay, one moment.
Thanks. Thanks.
Okay, so we see very interesting suggestions on what modules should be added to the minimum modules when you're doing financial literacy training. So we shall definitely consider this as we wrap the minimum modules. We want to differentiate when you're doing financial literacy training and you're doing awareness creation on how money should be used. So this is going to be a tick. A lot of you agree, but there are also suggestions on what else we need to include. Thank you for your participation on that particular Jamboard. We shall now move to the next exercise, and this, not exercise, but the next slide. So in this slide, we are going to be looking into the training methods and tools. A lot of us say we are doing digital literacy, others say we are doing analog literacy. So we just want to differentiate between those two and the curriculums that we have come across. I know it's quite obvious for most of us, but maybe just to recap for the members, is that when you're doing the paper delivery of financial literacy training, you're using flip charts, you're using pictorials, you're using books with illustrations, exercises, role plays, scenario cards, and flashcards. When you're doing a digital delivery, and please note, this is not a digital curriculum. You are delivering the curriculum in a digital manner. And in this case, you're using interactive voice responses, you're using SMSs, and you're using e-learning. And this is what we came across in the discussion. Okay, fantastic. I will hand over now to Marike on the next session, which is going to be on the training of trainers.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I dropped out for a second there. I had connectivity issues. We did warn you that we would be having technical difficulties during this session, but so far so good. We're still here and we're still going strong. So as Eunice just said, the next session is on the training of trainer process, training of trainers in general. How does that work? So we want to start by looking a little bit at the things we found. So what we saw is that everyone in Uganda, in the Uganda refugee response, is using a trickle-down approach to training trainers. So if you want to add anything, as always, if you want to comment, if you want to correct us, this is just an overview of what we found. But if you feel like something's missing here, please do drop it in the chat box, and my colleagues are keeping an eye on that so that it can feed into our conversations. But so based on our discussions, we saw that everyone uses a trickle-down approach where a trainer at a central level HQ is a master trainer. This can be someone, a consultant, someone based at an NGO, someone based at the government, who is training trainers of trainers. And I'm going to have to say trainers a lot, sorry, who then go out and train community-based trainers. We have seen that this is not always the case. Sometimes there is just master trainer direct to the community-based trainers where they, for instance, would be called to a central location to be trained all together. But most often we did see that there's that intermediary level of a master training the trainers, who is then training the community-based trainers. So we want to hear from you in the chat box. What mechanisms does your organization put in place to assure that in this process, quality is not lost? How do we assure that quality is maintained? We've just seen that everyone puts a lot of energy and thought into developing curriculums that are, material, the actual content of the trainings that is engaging, that covers everything. Now, how do we make sure that this content actually arrives at the participants? So how do we ensure that quality is maintained? Please do use the chat box. And then next slide. The next slide, we can go to looking a little bit more. Oops, just going to open the chat box as well. Sorry, I'm just setting up again. There we go. So what criteria do we use to select trainers? So what we saw when we were discussing with the people that are actively working on financial literacy training in the refugee context in Uganda was that often selection criteria are similar. The biggest one was, do these people speak local languages? Examples are Kinyarwanda, Kinyabwisha, apologies for the pronunciation, and Kiswahili, but many others, of course, as varied as the refugees themselves. Then the ability to work under minimum supervision to deliver the trainings. A person that's local to the community, only if applicable. This is often a criteria, but not always, as I'll explain in a second. The level of education and potentially sometimes experience as teachers in schools or experience with an NGO. So these are more general selection criteria that we've noted that cuts slightly across the board for all actors. And then where are trainers selected from? So we saw 4 groups really. We saw that they're selected from the Bank of Uganda accredited trainers, for instance. We also saw, sorry, the slides are, yes. So the Bank of Uganda accredited trainers, I'm talking about that little box there, you see that's point 2. Some people, this is rare, but some people use existing staff members to do training, financial literacy training. And then a lot of people use either host community members or refugee population members. Often the organizations are selecting either refugee or either host community, but we've also seen instances where there is a combination of both. For instance, an organization that mentioned that they try to respect the 70-30 kind of division that is principle for the refugee response. But as I said, I think the vast majority uses people from the refugee population itself, but not only. So if there's any additional reasons that we might have missed, please do drop them in the chat box. I see a lot of messages flying by. That's really great. I think in these online trainings, that's really a good way to foster a discussion, is to use the chat box as much as possible. And my colleagues are keeping an eye on that, and it's definitely feeding into our thinking and into the learning brief that we'll be developing as a final kind of output from this event. So where are they from? Next slide, please. We saw that indeed, so many trainers are either from host communities or from the refugee populations. And so why would an organization prefer a host community member to a refugee population member? Maybe because they have higher academic credentials. And here I'm just repeating all of the things that were mentioned to us when we were doing our preliminary kind of discussions on trying to understand what's going on at the moment in practice in the refugee response. Another thing that we heard regularly was experience working with NGOs, other agencies. That happens more with host community members, and more effective at coordinating and supervising trainings. For refugees, the things that were mostly mentioned were their ability to communicate in the local languages, but also the fact that they share the culture and therefore are able to translate some of the examples, some of these concepts, also in a cultural manner to the people that they're training. And then accessibility. Often trainers from the refugee population are based at the settlement level and therefore don't need to travel as far, which is saving money in transport costs, of course. And then as we were discussing this and kind of compiling all of the information, some of the questions we had were around, the key selection criteria of merit and experience. When we were talking about refugee populations trainers, how important is that? Are we privileging really people that are able to communicate, that share the culture, that they're already in the area, or is really experience and merit also something that is high on the agenda? So please do drop your comments, your suggestions, and your additions in the chat box, as I mentioned. And then final, next slide, some facts on training of trainers. So we have seen that the selection of trainers is quite varied, as I just mentioned and spoke through, the criteria, the people, the reasoning behind it, and also the training itself is quite varied. It differs a lot between organizations. One of the elements that we looked at was the duration, and you see that in the visual here. So what you see in front of you is that the training duration for training of trainers varied between 1 and 5 days, with the darker being one that's mentioned more. So we see that actually these trainings for trainers are often quite short when dealing with trainers that might they themselves have little experience with training, with financial literacy or finance concepts in general. And so, so yeah, that's just something that really kind of jumped out for us when we were talking to people, that the training duration seems quite short all across the board. So if your training organizations are longer or shorter, please do also drop that in the chat box. We didn't ask everyone. We also didn't, might have missed things. So yeah. And then also another variety that we saw is that some training programs are a one-off standalone training where people would be gathered and just train for a week all together, and then kind of go into the field and train the refugees on, but another example at the other end of the spectrum is kind of ongoing trainings where people would be continuously trained every month, every 2 months, but often for a shorter amount of time. And some of these people would always also be given ongoing support. Then I wanted to flag that we noticed when we're talking to people a good practice from the Karamoja region. Initially, there's an organization there that, and this is so not the refugee context, I'm just going to put that out there very clearly. And they were initially paying VSLAs as part of their project activities, but with the kind of project plan to kind of graduate them, phase them out from being paid by the organization to being paid by the groups themselves. So to have the quality of their services being of that level, that the VSLAs would dedicate funding from their own kind of pot to keeping this support from the trainer and the training sessions going. So this is something that we found very interesting. I think is of interest to many people on the call today. So as a next step, we're proposing that we could document this in a little bit more detail and share it around with all of you to see if this is something that could be of interest to replicate by others.
Yes, and indeed, just as Marike is mentioning, you invest a lot of time and then a lot of resources to come up with organization-based curriculums, or you also adopt the curriculums from either WFP, UNCDF, or from Bank of Uganda. However, when it comes to the trainers, we sort of lose that connection of quality. And it's important for us to invest a lot of time on the trainers that are going to deliver this training so that in the end, we don't water down the quality. And I think from what Marike is actually mentioning, the amount of time we spend, especially if they are new trainers, is extremely important for us to be able to determine the quality of training that we are going to deliver to the field. On the next slide, and of course, the future is what we see on the Karamoja experience, where the groups themselves demand the training, they look for the trainer, and they pay for the training. I think this is what we would want to see in future. It's not happening a lot, but it was really a very good example of what we saw. So we are going to get into a poll on the existing pathways, on how we harmonize this. What are the existing pathways that are used by your organization to provide continued training for trainers? We saw that there's one that does 2 days, others do 3 days. We didn't really come across anyone who is doing an advanced level of TOT. So most of the trainers that we met are actually trainers that have been used only for the basic or the foundation level of financial literacy training. Interesting also to note that the Bank of Uganda has a publicly available accredited list of trainers, and some of the organizations have actually been populating this every time they train their trainers using the Bank of Uganda curriculum. So it's really quite interesting. I think Kulain will drop the link of the accredited, as well as of the accredited trainers by the Bank of Uganda, as well as the poll that we are going to use right now on what are the existing pathways that are being used by each of the organizations that we have here to provide continued training.
So maybe just to say, to clarify that what we're really trying to get at with the poll is, and please do click the Menti link in the chat box right now to go to the poll. So we know that a lot of organizations are doing refresher trainings, and someone commented that in the chat box as well, the importance of keep on refreshing trainers, which is, it's true, this is really key. But what about actually advancing the training of these trainers, making them become themselves more experienced, more specialized, more knowledgeable? We know that many of these trainers actually have a background as being refugees or as being host community members, and not specific background in financial matters. They might themselves have actually been only recently become very literate in finance. So how do you make sure that apart from your basic training, apart from your refresher trainings, is there any other ways you are trying to make these trainers more advanced in their own knowledge, in their ability to train refugee community members as part of financial literacy training? So this is really, we're trying to we have very little examples. This is also not something we asked when we were discussing with people, of course. So it's something we would like to learn from you. Are there good practices? Are organizations already having these pathways? This could be sending them to another organization for a training. I know Bank of Uganda is providing accreditation. So maybe it's about sending them to the Bank of Uganda training on top of your own training. Maybe it's connecting them to an online training, or by a one-on-one mentorship with someone more experienced. I'm just giving examples that come to mind, but I just wonder if anyone in Uganda is doing any of these things that kind of look beyond training our trainers with the basic kind of training modules we have and the refresher trainings that we put in place.
Yes, and one of the key things that as you feel in this, in terms of how you're using, what pathways you're using as an organization, are you offering refresher trainings, for example? Are you elevating the training that you gave to the ones that are doing basic level training to be the ones to do advanced level curriculum when it is available? So these are very important things that we need to consider. And as we do this, one of the key things that would be really interesting for the CASH working group to take up, and very interesting to see that now we have a financial literacy working group, is actually to look at establishing a database of these trainers, so that anyone who is actually going to the field to begin training doesn't begin by finding out who are the community members here. Can we offer training to these 2 or 3 people? We need to have a database of those that have already been trained as training of trainers, so that they can actually be used for future trainings, or they could actually be given more training so that they become trainers of the advanced level, or the advanced level of curriculum when it is going to be available. So some of these things that we are mentioning right now, interesting to see the pathways. They are going to be uptaken by the financial literacy work stream of the CASH working group. I see there's coaching and mentorship. We offer refresher training. Grameen works with the same training across all the projects and trains them in a number of skills, linkage to banking, digital literacy, and we have seen the trainers become more skilled over time. That's very interesting from Grameen. Mentorship while training is ongoing, shadowing during rollout to perfect the trainer skills and knowledge, and refresher trainings and mentorship. And I hope that as we do this, we are also considering using the same trainers to really give them more knowledge so that they can actually be used for the advanced level of training, if they will qualify. Okay, interesting to see what's coming out from the Gumboard. Maybe you can also continue to put more on the poll.
Maybe also, if someone feels like they're doing something which is really interesting for the rest of the group, feel free to unmute yourself and comment. We would be very happy to learn from you. I see people are also commenting in the chat box. I'll just pause for a minute. All right, if nobody is happy or looking forward to share, then I just want to go back to the Bank of Uganda certified trainers list. So my colleague Elaine has dropped 2 links in the chat box. One is for the certified trainers and one is for the master trainers. So just to mention that. And I think this is very interesting that this list already exists. How can actors working in the field maybe contribute to this list? Is that a possibility? How can we make sure that we, have trainers that are already trained by our own organizations, also certified by Bank of Uganda, if we want to do this? Of course, would that add to the quality of the trainings? So I think this is really an interesting point, as Eunice mentioned, that will be hopefully taken forward in the financial literacy training subgroup.
Okay, so going back to our exercise, thank you very much for that particular contribution. We shall definitely consider that. The vision of the cash working group is to make sure we have harmonized approaches. And I'm glad that we have taken up financial literacy training as one of the key areas where we could have processes that are harmonized and probably even standardized for the use of others. So I think the question that we beg to ask here is that should minimum standards for TOTs or training of trainers be adopted or developed? What is the minimum time that we should use, for example? Is that something that we think we should consider? What is the minimum time you should train your training of trainers? Can you use them for advanced training? What is the curriculum they are going to be implementing? Such kind of things, I think this is something that the financial literacy sub-working group, financial literacy training sub-working group of the cash working group will be considering. And so going to the next phase, please feel free to, of course, be part of that group. If you want and you haven't been part of the group that has already met once, kindly drop me an email and I will definitely be able to add you. On the next session, we are really looking at something that has been a big thorn in the flesh, and this is on coordination and collaboration. We know we are doing quite a lot already. We are really coordinating, but I want us to look at the 4W that we filled in already and see whether there are opportunities for us to enhance the coordination or collaboration that we are already doing. So just a moment as we go to the 4W.
And if you have not yet filled in the details of your organization on the 4Ws, my colleague Elaine will again drop the link in the chat box. You can also click on there and go to the Excel sheet and fill in, complete or edit the details of your own organization. Please do not adjust details for other organizations, only stick to your own. And then the last column at the right is really trying to collect information on how long you have this project running. That will provide financial literacy training, and what is the start and end date. Also, if it's committed funding that will be starting in the future. So a project that is coming up and likely to happen.
Okay, so we see quite a number of organizations in the same settlements, and we also have at the bottom of this Excel sheet those that are working out of the refugee settlements as well. And thank you for adding in. Of course, we need to add in the dates. There are many that are doing or hoping to do financial literacy trainings, but probably they don't have confirmed funding at the moment. This particular sheet is only looking at those that are actively engaged in financial literacy training. And just a glance through means that we really need to talk to each other. We need to stop operating in silos. We need to speak to those that are implementing similar financial trainings in the locations that we have. Just to pick an example, in BDBD, we see Grameen, we see GSMA, Vision Fund, Save the Children, and Dan Chache, DCA. Of course, there's already enough quorum for us to have a discussion on how we can better coordinate and improve coordination actually on how we are delivering financial literacy training, particularly if we are focusing on the same groups as we can see from the charts.
Yeah, if I can just come in, one thing that I'm from Grameen Foundation, and so Grameen and GSMA collaborated on.
Maybe we can have someone unmute and share an example of how collaboration is already happening. Sorry.
All right, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Sorry, okay. No, I was going to say that Grameen and GSMA collaborated on the same curriculum in Bidi Bidi, so we're working together on that rather than duplicating.
That's a very good example. Anyone more would like to speak on particularly the 4 Ws? Anyone speak? Okay.
So I think it's really great to see that a lot of people are adding their own organizations. That's really great. Let me add a couple of lines. I see it's filling up quickly. Please feel free to speak up if you think of any other examples of collaboration already happening, or how you see, if you see someone that's in the same settlement and you think this could be interesting, feel free to speak up. This event is also about learning from each other and kind of forging those links and new relationships. So please feel free to reach out in the chat box and set those working relationships up moving forward. I see someone is asking in the chat box if people can give examples of available open source materials, trainings, data. So for instance, the WFP UND CDF curriculum is open source. The Bank of Uganda trainer database is freely accessible. Are there any other core resources like that that would be helpful for people engaging on financial literacy training activities, programming?
Okay, thank you. And this link is going to still be available for us to fill in. You probably don't have all the information that you require, but clearly the message that we get from this is that we really need to speak to each other. We need to coordinate at field levels, and we need to really harmonize how we are approaching financial literacy trainings. One of the key questions that we asked ourselves is how you can make sure that there's a continuation, there's a continuous process. If you are doing basic literacy trainings, how can you link your beneficiaries or your trainers to actually get into advanced training? And one of the possible ways is to use a referral mechanism. We have seen these referrals working when we are targeting beneficiaries using different sectors. And I think it can also work where we actually refer beneficiaries to those that are going to be doing advanced training. So we don't all need to do the same level of trainings, or we all don't need to do one geographical space. We need to really work together to make sure we are not duplicating our efforts, and that financial literacy training is actually scaled up, both in terms of the numbers of people that we are targeting, but also the levels of training that we are offering. So also that also relates to referrals for trainers. Those that have been doing basic level of foundation training, can they be given more trainings to actually deliver advanced levels of trainings. So look at others that are working in the same location as yourselves. Look at those that are targeting the same groups or the same level of activity. Look at those that are having activities based on the same goals that you have, and have a discussion on how we can increase collaboration. Of course, the financial literacy sub-working group is going to support us in this, but I think these discussions can already start to happen at the different segments where we're implementing our activities.
Great. So this is really interesting, and I just wanted to flag that you know, the idea of today was also to meet other people, of course, or see where people are implementing things that are interesting for you, for yourself, and that how you could learn from each other or collaborate, and bringing people together to discuss things further in participatory events, or just in other kind of bigger kind of learning events is something that we at ULearn kind of is part of our core activities. We've just launched a service called the Tailored Evidence and Learning Service, and you can, on our website, and my colleague Colleen will drop the link in the chat later, you can submit a request to get support from us with any of the kind of convening that you might want to be doing as a result of this event today, or just in general, if you have any interesting things coming up that would be of use to the wider refugee response. And this could be really around looking at existing evidence already, making existing materials more accessible by doing quality summaries, for instance, convening people into an event, you know, we might be able to support. So please do take a look at the website. There's also a 2-pager that provides more detail. So I think this has been really interesting and really great. I want to thank all of you for making it to the end. This is very nice. So we looked at the financial literacy training landscape in Uganda, how participants were selected, how the trainings are implemented, what curriculum is used, how training of trainers, and coordination and collaboration. So really great to see that so many people actually remained on the event throughout the session. I just want to say that today for me was really a starting point. It's about, you know, learning from what's already happening by looking at what's happening in the Uganda context, and then and learning from each other what you're doing. And I really apologize again for not being able to do this in person, but having to do this online. This is just the current situation we're in. So hopefully in the future we'll be able to do likewise things in person. But at least I see the chat box was really active, and I hope that the interactive tools we used helped with fostering those relationships. I hope that we have not left you with more questions than answers, and if we did, I really apologize. But I do hope that you have a deeper understanding of financial literacy training in Uganda. Some of the plans of topics that I mentioned at the start of our event were part of the things we explored with all of the actors in Uganda, that were part of the resources that we looked at, but that we didn't include in the event. You can see it was already an almost 3-hour event, 2.5 hours. So, you know, we had to be selective and push some other things for the future, or for another setting or another channel or another format, which would be better suited to discuss these things. And some of the things that are going to be coming up is digital financial literacy training. There will be something dedicated, organized by the Cash Working Group. Monitoring and evaluation is definitely something that will be coming up, probably taken on by the financial literacy training sub-working group of the Cash Working Group. We'll be doing something towards the end of the year on financial service provider, so stay tuned for that. And the next topic that we will be diving into will be on women entrepreneurs. So if any of you has strong experience on women entrepreneurs, interesting resources, feel free to already start sending this to us, and we'll make sure to include it in our next work. So then just to say that, as I mentioned, we started with a discussion paper to inform the meeting, to inform our event today, our discussion, and we'll be kind of turning that into a learning brief now, including all of your comments and questions and suggestions. And so this will be circulated in a few weeks. We'll get down and get to it right now. So if everything's well, you've seen a feedback poll pop up on your screen. And please do take the time to just answer those 3 short questions. This will help us to improve on our work, next events, that bit of feedback. So thank you so much for participating. And I also want to thank the whole team, in particular, also Eunice, who has dedicated a lot of time to this. And I'm just going to start my video for just a moment. There we go. So really lovely to see all of you today online. And thank you to all of you for being here, being in the discussion with us, and for the whole team for having put this together. It was a long piece of work. And I have a little financial literacy training tool kind of game that was developed in Uganda. And we were lucky enough to test it recently. It was supported by UNCDFIC and by the Bank of Uganda. And it's a very nice game. It's like the financial literacy financial game version of Monopoly, let's say. So do look out for it. And I wanted to give this to Eunice to thank her for all of the hard work that's gone into this.
Very nice of you. Thank you so much, Marike. And thank you for the good work. Thank you for staying to the end of this exercise. It's been a learning experience as well for myself. It was very unfortunate that the jump boards were deleted, but then again, really, it's been an experience. I hope you have learned something. I hope this has been a beginning to how you're structuring financial literacy trainings in your organization. And I really hope that the cash working group is going to be you and extremely important as a reference point on how we can improve financial literacy training. So thank you for the feedback that you're giving to us. Feel free not to agree that this learning event has been extremely interesting. Of course, with the technical challenges we are learning, this is a digital world. We hope that it's going to be much better. So please give us your feedback and let us continue to collaborate. Remember to drop me a line if you want to be part of the working group on financial literacy training. So many thanks, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
And then also just to say that, of course, feel free to get in touch with us. We had a slide with our email addresses, but at the moment it's not able to show it, but we will make sure to drop that in the chat box too. So if you have questions, follow-up questions, or things you would like to discuss, if you would like to go on the cash working group financial literacy training sub-working group, I know Anna asked that in the chat box, feel free to reach out to Eunice. She can put you on the team. So I'll be doing that right now. Thank you very much for staying. Have a great day, everyone. I look forward to meeting you all very soon. Bye.
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 Great work, Marike, Eunice, everyone. Very good. Thanks a lot.
Well done. Great.
Thank you.